Oh, okay, no problem. Gamar Chatima Tova. That means thank you, Josh. May you be sealed for good things. There was once a young man who believed he had the most beautiful heart in his community, maybe even in the world. But he knew he had the most beautiful heart in his community, and he wanted to show it to them. A large crowd gathered, and they all admired his heart, for it was beautiful. He showed it to them. It was perfect. There was not a mark or flaw. If you know your anatomy, he could have been in Gray's Anatomy. His heart looked like the model, the plastic model waiting in your doctor's office. It was pristine. He was really proud of showing it to everyone and started to show them how perfect it was because of how much he took care of it, and it was beautiful. But an old man appeared at the front of the crowd. Now, I'm pretty sure this story is borrowed from another tradition, but the first time I heard the story, that old man was Rabbi Akiva. So the old man's going to be Rabbi Akiva in this story. Either way, the old man / Rabbi Akiva said to the boy, I don't want to be competitive or argumentative. Your heart is perfect looking. It's beautiful. But I would never trade with you. In fact, I think I might actually have a more beautiful and perfect heart. And so he showed his heart too. He showed it to the people. And as the people saw it, they were aghast. They were confused that what they saw astonished them. The boy started laughing. They saw that Rabbi Akiva's heart was beaten up. It had scars and cracks in it. It had entire chunks, pieces missing from it, cleaves all over it. They weren't sure what to say. The young man finally spoke up and he said, with all due respect, Rabbi, or old man, I'm trying to say this with respect, but your heart is very imperfect. It's definitely not more beautiful than mine. How could you possibly think that? Just look at your heart. Rabbi Akiva smiled, nodded, and kind of gave that avuncular look that sometimes people have. He looked at the young man and the rest of the people and said, the thing is, you think the more whole a heart is well, that's how much more beautiful or perfect it is. In reality, it's specifically in the places where my heart looks more torn that I would say it becomes more beautiful. Because every time I interact with a person, whether I'm having a short conversation or even, quite honestly, even an argument, I take a piece of that person's heart and they take a piece of mine. So there are places where it looks like it was out of additions that don't match, and places where it looks like pieces are missing. There are places where people who have had a great impact in my life are no longer here, and you'll see those sections are totally gone. And that's what makes it beautiful. So every place here where you think you see something ugly or broken, it's actually right in those places where the beauty lies. Those are the places that made me stronger. They're the pieces that made me come to know a person more deeply. Yes, sometimes they come together perfectly, and sometimes they're harder to fit. But over years and years of giving pieces of my heart away and gaining others, this is what it's come to look like. I think it's quite beautiful. In some ways, I might say it's perfect. Everyone was quiet. They didn't know what to say. They just stood there looking at each other. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the young man walked up to Rabbi Akiva. He stood there silently, and tears were running down his cheeks. He looked at Rabbi Akiva tenderly, and then he looked down to his hands. And slowly, the boy ripped a piece of his heart and handed it to Rabbi Akiva, who placed it on his. And Rabbi Akiva did the same and smiled. And they were both more beautiful for it. There are pieces of our hearts that are missing. In the past year, both as individuals as well as a community, our hearts have been ripped out of our chest. There are large sections of our heart missing. Many of us have experienced personal loss this year. Tomorrow, we'll come together, we'll recite Yizkor in memory of those loved ones who are no longer with us. Tonight, we deprive ourselves of food and drink. We, those who remain on this earth, attempt to transcend the physical and focus on our spiritual self. We try to ignore our bodies and become souls, be angels, be eternal. The pangs of hunger that we feel are nothing compared to the pain of loss for those who can no longer fast and pray with us. We're told on Yom Kippur we should afflict our souls, and we do it knowing that we still can, while others, those pieces of our heart are no longer here. And there are pieces missing from our hearts. Commensurate to the love and space our loved ones took up in our lives, we're left with voids of their departure. And our hearts and our lives are more beautiful because of that. We read in the Talmud, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked his students, go and see which is the good path to which a person should cling to. And they all came back, and Rabbi Eliezer said a person should have a good eye. Rabbi Yehoshua said a good friend. Rabbi Yosef said a good neighbor. And Rabbi Shimon said a good heart. Rabbi Elazar said a good heart. Their teacher said to them, I prefer the words of Elazar over all of your words, for included in his words are all of yours. You cannot have a good heart without having the other pieces. Our hearts are perfect and beautiful, not in spite of, but precisely because we are hurting. There are giant sections of our heart missing. Holes in our collective heart are one heart. We say the idea, the words, Am echad belev echad, one nation, Israel, in one heart. We have one heart, and it is broken. 1 year ago, this week, we held our collective breath as our family was attacked. For our family in Israel, the world was turned upside down in a moment. Our brothers and sisters were dancing when the sirens blared. They were sleeping soundly in their bed or on a morning jog. From thousands of miles away, we had the luxury of slowly realizing that the world would never be the same. Before we knew how to respond, we saw the footage of gliders and bulldozers. Then, like an earthquake, the realization of the magnitude hit us in waves. While people around the world rejoiced, we watched as the pieces of bodies were discovered. We sat in Shiva with mothers and fathers, husbands and wives whose loved ones would never return. As the chants of hatred around the world grew louder, we waited silently, barely breathing, and strained to hear the word of those who were imprisoned. As we cried, we were mocked and abused, beaten and berated. I had the opportunity of going to Israel just less than 3 weeks after the events of October 7th. I went to an area where the army was tasked with identifying bodies. And we were greeted by a man, a colonel, actually I don't remember his rank, I apologize, who looked at us with a kippah on his head and he said, welcome to hell. When I was a teenager, I was part of an Orthodox youth group called NCSY. On Shabbat evenings, just as Shabbat was ending, as Shabbos was ending, we would sing songs. One of the songs we sang started with these words. We learned in a dark, frigid cellar, alone, just a small group of men, when in rushed the soldiers and led them all away. The flame of Torah flickered on that day. Describing what happened when it was illegal to study Torah and when our ancestors were persecuted for attempting to continue our tradition. But that song, Someday, ends with redemption. It says, someday we will all be together. Someday we'll be sheltered and warm. Never will we have to express any fears. Our scars and our wounds will disappear. Our scars won't disappear, but they make us beautiful. There's a story that some of you may know, the story of King Solomon and his servant. So one day, King Solomon went to his chambers and he was thinking about pride. He was thinking about happiness and sadness. He said, pride can harm a man. And he asked his friend Benaiah, I have a job for you. Benaiah said, whenever you ask, your wish is my command. And I said, I want to own a magical ring. And if you know, you may know this story. As you wish, Benaiah, describe the ring for me that I may find it. King Solomon, King Shlomo HaMelech said, all I can tell you is this: if a person is happy and puts this ring on his finger, he will be instantly sad and humbled. But a sad man who places this ring upon his finger will be happy. And so his servant goes and finds a ring. And right on the band of the ring, where you can see, it says, Gam ze ya'avor. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. Whether you're in a dark place and feel like things can't get better, or you need to be brought down a peg and you're so happy you're boasting and you're gloating. Gam ze ya'avor. This too shall pass. When you're a king, it's easy to be philosophical. As the sages say, it's good to be the king. By sages, I mean Mel Brooks. But when the world is arrayed against you, it's a little harder to see that this too shall pass. But it will. And we will endure. On October 8th of last year, one day after our tragedy, I was privileged to be a part of a community gathering. In that gathering, I gave a speech and I said the words, Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. There is nothing new under the sun. There is nothing new under the sun. Jews have been hated for millennia. Whatever is considered the most heinous crime against humanity, we are the perpetrators in other people's eyes. We will endure, as we always have. We came through the dungeons of the Inquisitions. We survived the Crusades and the blood libels. We walked through the fire of the Holocaust. And each time, we left pieces of our hearts there. Yet we are still here. We have giant chasms in our heart from the losses we endured, but endured them we have. And we will continue to do so. Gam ze ya'avor, this too shall pass, but Yisrael will not. The children of Israel will not. We will endure not in spite of, but because our hearts are broken. Our sadness is our strength. Our grief is our resilience. Because we are Am Echad Belev Echad, one nation in one heart.